Musicast, the Art Fisher podcast. I'm Reese Fisher.
And I'm Nolan Fisher.
And today we're going to be talking about acclaimed rock band Pink Floyd. Once again, Pink Floyd. And we wanted to do this episode, obviously, because we both enjoy their music, but also because we recently started using a riff that our youngest brother, David, shout out to David Fisher, he recorded the intro, which is the intro to one of their songs, Interstellar Overdrive. So that's what we're using as the intro to our podcast, which you just heard. So Pink Floyd, I'm sure those of you listening have heard of Pink Floyd at this point in time. In 2023, they formed in 1965 with Roger Keith Barrett, otherwise known as Syd Barrett, who is, Nolan can correct me if I'm wrong, but the founder of the band, along with Nick Mason, Rick Wright, and then Roger Waters, and eventually David Gilmour as well. But those are the main members of the band. And this band, Pink Floyd, they got their name from a pair of California bluesmen by the name of Pink Anderson and Floyd Council. So they combined those names. And Pink Floyd is known for many things, but they have many different awards, such as they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1996. They won a Grammy Award in 1994, and they are definitely, how I would describe it, they're known for popularizing like concept albums for sort of like a massive consumption on the rock and roll scene.
Yeah, one of the first and definitely the biggest progressive rock bands that ever existed. They've got a really interesting history, just in general, from when those five guys got together, because I think there were a couple other guys before, but like they all switched around as bands seemed to at the beginning, and then eventually settled on those five guys, with Syd Barrett being the like lead songwriter until after they released their first album, at which point they kicked him out. So they released their first album, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn, which has the long instrumental track Interstellar Overdrive on it. But pretty much this album would probably be lost to history if it was just like a Syd Barrett solo album. It has some unconventional stuff on it for the time period, but in general it was just like psychedelic pop, really similar to a lot of other UK bands that were making stuff at the time. Really the only major difference is that I don't know, Syd Barrett was just like a lunatic improv type guy with the guitar, and I think that ended up being pretty unique and defined a lot of psychedelic rock albums for the next few years. But basically, I don't know if you like this album particularly much or not. Do you want to go through at all like their history first, and then?
Yeah, I think we should go through their history and then sort of talk about each of their albums, unless you want to mention each album, then do the history, and then talk about each of the albums.
No, I'll just go through their history quick, and then we can loop back around. So they after this album, Syd Barrett as they kind of started to get famous, get recognized, Syd Barrett was using more and more drugs. He was probably already schizophrenic, and the drugs didn't make it any better. It's unclear just how many drugs he did, but basically they kicked him out of the band because he was becoming unstable and just generally mentally unwell. There's some... with Pink Floyd, they're such a big band, and they've been so popular for so long that there's all these like legends about them. And so one of the ones from this time period is like one of the things that made them like really decide to kick him out of the band was that they were trying to like record a song, and Syd Barrett kept playing like the same, like they would start playing a song and Syd Barrett would just change the chords every time they went to play the song. And I think he named the song something like "The Song Never Stays the Same," and they were like, "Okay, this guy's lost his mind." Like they were trying to record one song, and he would just change the song every time they tried to play it. So they just, at least that's how the legend goes. So anyway, they follow up "Piper at the Gates of Dawn" with "A Saucer Full of Secrets," which is it didn't sell particularly well, but it did get them some radio play. It made them slightly famous in the UK and slightly more famous in like France, so they were starting to gain an audience. They made a movie soundtrack for a movie called More after this, which it wasn't a particularly big movie, and the soundtrack is not well known for anything. They followed that up with a double album called Umaguma, half of which is live songs, and the other half are like it's original studio album. So it's like one live album and then one new album. The live album is still kind of well known, like it has some of their early stuff on it, played really well live, and the studio album is kind of known for just being like music you put on to fall asleep.
Gotcha.
They followed that up with Adam Heartmother, which moved them into a much more progressive style of music. Umaguma, Piper at the Gates of Dawn, and A Saucer Full of Secrets have some longer tracks on them, like longer instrumentals, but nothing like Adam Heartmother, the title track, which is 23-minute, like pseudo operatic classical composition with rock music in it. So it takes up half of the whole album. It's just one long instrumental song. And then the album has like the second side of the album is just one song by each guy in the band, and then a really long other instrumental song. So this was the album that kind of really changed the way that they were thinking about writing the albums, because before this they were doing this thing where like each one of them would try to write a song and then they would compose large bits together, and you can hear sort of the blueprints for their most famous work of how they worked together as a unit and sort of how their individual songwriting skills didn't succeed at this point. Like the songs they wrote by themselves were not very notable, probably until Adam Heartmother, and then some of these songs they start to really develop voices of their own while being able to write like one big composition. They followed this album up with an album called Meddle, Meddle, which is the same thing as Adam Heartmother but reversed. So the first half of the album is largely sort of a song written by each guy, and then the last song on the album's 23 minutes long, and it's like one big composition written by all of them.
Good God.
Yeah. After that is when they made another film soundtrack for a movie called Obscured by Clouds, which is like easily their least well-known thing, other than maybe the More soundtrack.
These film soundtracks aren't for their own film, to be clear, right?
No, it's just both of them are movies made by the same guy that the band was just friends with, but they're not particularly interesting pieces of music. Obscured by Clouds is a little more interesting, but as albums, they're not really rewarding to listen to. But after that is when Pink Floyd went on a tear of making just number one hits, classic albums. We've got Dark Side of the Moon, 2 years later, Wish You Were Here, 2 years later, Animals, and 2 years later, The Wall. So obviously they became internationally famous, renowned around the world, fantastically wealthy. And yet the content of their albums grew more and more cynical and more paranoid as time went on. So Dark Side of the Moon is kind of like a truly classic concept. Like, it's meant to be all encompassing, meant to be appreciated by just about anybody. And then each album seems to progressively get less, I don't know that I would say less mainstream appeal, because obviously these were just like the mainstream albums. But like Wish You Were Here gets a lot more cynical. It's very anti-capitalism and very anti like music industry.
I'd like to point out also that these are mainstream albums, but they were never created in order to be mainstream albums, which is like pretty different from some of the music that's now like happening nowadays, which is like strictly being manufactured in order to be mainstream. Like there's like little other thought going into the music other than let's maximize the amount of money that can be like pumped out of this.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was kind of like the disambiguation of progressive rock as a whole, was something that some music listeners felt that this type of rock music was more artful because it was, you know, quote unquote real compositions. It was closer to being classical music, but it still had freewheeling styles from folk and jazz. So it was both like improvisational, but also highly choreographed, but it wasn't meant to be like pop music that you dance to. It's stuff that you sit down and listen to. And I think that was pretty different for the time for that type of music to be popular.
Which also, I know we talked a little bit offline about this, but they seem to have like hit like almost at the correct time with like record albums being like extremely popular at that time, and people actually like taking the time to sit around and like listen to albums with one another. Like that's what people were doing at that time, and that was a really popular thing to do.
Oh, undoubtedly. I think they've all been pretty open about the fact that like they didn't think that Dark Side of the Moon was tremendously different than what they had been doing before. I think they probably like in their interviews they say like, yeah, we knew we made a great album, but like it wasn't that much better than everything else what they did. And so they attribute their like confounding international success to luck, because they were just like, yeah, this was just what people wanted at the time, and we just kept hitting our heads against the wall, and this one broke through.
Yeah, and then they made The Wall.
Yeah, so then The Wall is really the last Pink Floyd record made by all of them, because they, during this time as they were growing famous, Roger Waters...
Sorry, we did skip Animals. I just wanted to say The Wall.
Well, Wish You Were Here, so in part being about like, you know, sort of their disdain for the music industry and the greed of these executives who were taking advantage of their art, is also, you know, Wish You Were Here is a tribute to Syd Barrett, because they were really sad that they kicked the guy out of the band, although, you know, they couldn't have been that sad because they did kick him out. But it's a heartfelt album, and it definitely comes across that there is some genuine authenticity to their grief and their disappointment in what happened with Barrett. But after this album, they began to have problems with creative control, as Roger Waters tried to assert more and more direction on their music. So that's what led to Animals and The Wall, both of which are increasingly more written like entirely by Waters. I think they kicked Richard Wright out after Animals. I don't think he's on All of the Wall.
Gotcha.
I think because Waters was just like, fuck you, this is my band now. There's definitely something with that. But basically after The Wall, which is already close to being a, I mean, there's still a lot of David Gilmour guitars that are like signature guitar solos, signature Gilmour lyrics, vocal performances. But the next album they did, the final cut, is like completely agreed upon to be a solo album for Roger Waters. He just took over.
Which one?
The final cut, the follow up to The Wall.
Gotcha. In 1983.
Yeah. It's musically very different. It's a lot more subdued in some way, but noisy in another. It's a very anti-war album, very critical album, very depressing album. But basically the result of this one was that the band split apart because Gilmour and Mason were kind of like, hey, we also are part of this group. And Waters is like, no, that's not true. It's just me now. So yeah, the band split up and they had some fun times in court. And basically Roger Waters was no longer a part of Pink Floyd. So then the remaining two guys wrote A Momentary Lapse of Reason and The Division Bell, which are both sort of uninteresting, like very generic to the time. Like A Momentary Lapse of Reason is mostly just like standard 80s rock stuff. It moves sort of away from progressive rock more into just standard 80s pop rock with the same long compositions they were known for. And then The Division Bell sort of pushes that idea even further. After that, the band was officially done making music. They did a few tours here or there just to make a few more millions. But they were not heard of again creatively until 2014, which was like 20 years after The Division Bell. They decided to put together some kind of recording of old like instrumental keyboard synth tracks that Richard Wright had done like long in the past, because he had just died previously in like the late 2000s. And so these guys, the last two guys, decided they would just like record some drum tracks and guitars over his synths. It's an extremely ambient album, barely Pink, like I wouldn't really even consider it Pink Floyd, even though it is technically.
Right.
So yeah, that kind of encompasses their whole career.
Yeah, to be clear, you did sort of say this, but Wright was not quite let go, but yeah, I guess you could say like squeezed out of the group
during the wall
in 1979. Gotcha. Yeah. Just wanted to tie up that loose end before we work through these albums. Yeah. You are much more familiar with this band than I. Same with David, our youngest brother as well. I really enjoy their music. I did more so think I never really like spent the time to think about like the concepts that went into their music. I just like listened to the song and was like, yeah, I like this song. But I think part of that comes about because I wasn't necessarily listening to like the album start to finish, and Dark Side of the Moon, as well as some of the Beatles albums sort of like took me into that headspace and was like, no, this is important that you do actually listen to an album start to finish. And for our younger listeners, I'm not saying that's something that you need to do with whatever music you're listening to. Listen to albums start to finish, but there is something to be said for specific albums that are designed to be listened to start to finish. So yeah,
is the band that got me into doing that.
Yeah.
Like I went from, whatever, just enjoying some like songs here or there, and then probably in like middle school or something, I just heard The Wall and Animals and Wish You Were Here and Dark Side of the Moon, and was instantly like, oh, this is an album can just be this string of music in a way that isn't, operatic or something. Like, it's still very distinct pieces.
Yeah, it can be far reaching, but then also there can be like a through line throughout. Yeah, I mean, let's get into each of their albums. So The Piper at the Gates of Dawn, I do really like. I wouldn't necessarily say like start to finish. um there are parts of it that like are a bit wild, but like are also enjoyable to sort of like work through as you listen to it. I mean, there's obviously a reason why I wanted David to record the riff of Interstellar Overdrive. I just really, really love that opening riff. And then it's also part of, or at least sampled on another band, the Death Grips. They have a song with that in it, and they use it like foundationally for the song, but then they do something like different with it, which is just really, really incredible.
Screaming the word bitch over top of it.
Yep, that's part of what I was talking about. There is also like borderline rap that happens in it, but yeah, that's the name of that song is I Want It, I Need It, by the Death Grips, if you're curious about it. Yeah, but I just really enjoy the way that it all works together, and it is also kind of like grungy as well. Like it's like a dirty sort of like sound to it that I just really, really enjoy.
Yeah, that's definitely my favorite song on the album. Astronomy Domine is probably my second favorite.
Yes.
That's like the other lead single. Bike is just like a good pop song. I don't mind Matilda Mother. And Power Our Talk is also a decent one. Has some good piano work on it. But yeah, as a whole, like relative to the stuff they would go on to do, this project is just like a loose collection of strongly written songs, but the album itself doesn't really mean a lot put together. And that was something that Barrett obviously never was going to be able to do. Like, even at this point in time, they couldn't consistently get him to show up when they had live shows.
Oh, brutal.
He would also just show up and be a crazy person. Like, he would show up and be like, I'm not playing any song. I'm writing a new song right now. And they'd be like, we can't play with you when you do that. We can't. And and then he starts playing, and they're like, it's...
Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure those kinds of friends are like somewhat fun to have to hang out with every now and then, but having a band with that person would be exceedingly difficult.
It probably would have worked if he wasn't the guy who wrote the majority of this first album.
Right, if he was just like, the drummer, or like
he still could have been the singer, vocalist and the guitarist.
Yeah.
It just, like, Syd Barrett probably could have worked really well with Roger Waters if Waters had been the self-assured guy he became later at the beginning. Like, if he had been able to rein him in some and be like, listen, you're clearly a genius, like an artistic genius, but like there was just no way they were going to get this guy to like sit down and...
Well, yeah, I mean, the I don't know if it was ever proven that he had schizophrenia,
no,
but assumed schizophrenia, alleged schizophrenia, whatever you'd like to call what Syd was dealing with. Yeah, that kind of as well as like assumedly being propelled on by LSD, sort of then seemingly turned the group off to drugs as well, right? Like they, even though they are like a celebrated sort of like, I don't want to say stoner rock, but you know, a lot of people associate Pink Floyd with stoners.
And drug culture in general seems to just have a fascinating. There's just something weird about. I mean, obviously, they started in the psychedelic genre, so that is inherently going to be druggies like that kind of thing. But there is just something about like their perfection towards a very specific type of sound and a very like clean crispness to a lot of their sound that probably just attracts people who are on drugs because the music just sounds good. So
yeah. But what I was gonna say with that is that it's ironic because the band is largely like straight edge and like straight laced.
They definitely don't like drug addict. Like they probably are like sick of people being like, I did acid and listened to their music, and they're like, kill yourself. We don't want to hear any of that anymore.
I really like your music, man. Like you've got a good vibe, man. Yeah. A saucer full piss off, mate. But meanwhile, as they are like, you know, British in the 60s and 70s, not that they weren't British after, but since they were British during that time, obviously like they're probably consuming alcohol like quite frequently. So I shouldn't just say that they're like straight edge. That the alcohol at that time probably went with the territory, and cigarettes as well largely kept them going, I would imagine. I'm pretty unfamiliar with A Saucer Full of Secrets. I've listened to, I think, all of their albums before, or at least most of them. I haven't listened to the original film soundtracks, mostly because I think you basically dissuaded me from them. A Saucer Full of Secrets, I have nothing to say about. Like, I don't really know this one at all.
I'd say I like one song on it.
Okay.
Like there are a number of songs on it that if you listened to them in conjunction with listening to a lot of like just music of the same time, like just UK just like psychedelic rock, experimental rock stuff, like the Beatles, like you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell the difference. Like there are some songs on here that are just like, was that like a weird Beatles B-side?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's kind of hard to not talk about them and the Beatles. I mean, obviously we're gonna do a Beatles episode or a series of episodes at some point. I do really like the fact that the names of their songs seem to largely be random, even though they probably aren't random. Like they mean something to the group, but like Corporal Clegg.
That's the one that I'm specifically thinking of, like the song's playing. And it's
you like that one or no?
It's just incredibly generic. Like it's like, is this the Zombies or the Yardbirds? Maybe this is the Beatles. But like it's just generic.
Well, it sounds like a Beatles song.
Yes.
Mean Mr. Mustard. Like
Corporal Clegg. That's like a part of the song is they just say that name.
Nice.
And, yeah.
David Bowie was also having, for any British listeners out there, David Bowie is how they would pronounce it. But
David Bowie.
He also had some similar songs like that, especially early on. Do you want to skip more?
I literally would only recommend more if you need to go to sleep. Like,
okay.
It's soothing, but I would never listen to it unless I had the intention of dozing off.
Right. And then Uma Guma, I actually these are large. It's largely like live.
The first half is it's a double album. So the first half is a live album.
Okay.
Which has some really good live versions that improves some of their earlier songs.
Right. So I see from sorry, not Adam Heart Mother, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn.
Yeah, and A Saucer Full of Secrets. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like the Astronomy Domini version is like twice as long as the album version, and it's way cooler. Like you can tell they worked it up, and as a band, they made it sound better.
I do remember this album getting me into live music as well, because like before that, I mean, this is kind of a tangent, but there were a number of Yanni live songs that I remember just like really enjoying that Dad would play when we were kids.
Yeah.
But then like as a young adult, this got me like into the into like appreciating live music and what it can be in making it something greater, and like even more polished despite it being live, which is interesting. Several species of small furry animals
gathered together in a cave and grooving with a pict.
Oh, that's a song on here.
It's not a good song. Don't listen to it. Don't be fooled. It's a terrible piece of music. It's an instrumental song with like really dumb sounds of small animals, like little like squirrel sounds and mouse sounds.
Speaking of sounds, someone's having a problem.
I can't control the fact that I live in a war zone. Okay. Somebody, this is completely unrelated. Somebody like died on my street this week. Just
what?
Like there was an overdose. There were cops everywhere, ambulances.
They actually died?
I think so. I haven't seen them again.
Damn, that is too bad.
Yeah, the war on drugs is not going well here.
Shit. Adam Heart Mother.
As a little set, drugs are bad. Don't do drugs.
Yeah, Pink Floyd would agree with that, especially now.
Yeah, so Uma Guma to me is like it. The live stuff shows that they're improving as musicians, because it shows that when they play together as a band, they're improving. Because like I wouldn't recommend the album. Even the live stuff, it is like better, but it's not amazing. But you can tell that writing that led them to this album, because I actually really like Adam Heart Mother. It's the first like great album I think Pink Floyd made.
Gotcha.
Have you heard it before?
I actually don't know if I have. I think I probably sat down to listen to it and was listening to it, and then I like had to do something. Like I don't know if I was like listening to it in college or something happened. So I don't really have any point of reference for this one. No, unfortunately. Why do you like this album?
I really like the title track. It's just like a really fun song.
Okay. To be clear, the album is 5 songs long.
6.
But it's 52 minutes.
Oh, yeah, never mind, 5. Yeah.
And it came out in 1970, just as another point of reference for people. Fat old son, won't you come? It's just funny that the name of the song is Fat Old Son. Yeah, that's not how the song goes.
Yeah, the first song is great. It's a long instrumental, like epic. It has a choir in it. There's tons of like string instrumentation.
Is David Gilmour a part of the band at this point?
Yeah. They've all all 4 of them have been it since the first album.
I would imagine he's the one doing that guitar then.
Yeah, he's their guitarist.
Okay. Because Sid is gone at this point.
Yeah, he's been gone since Piper. He wasn't part of Saucer Full of Secrets. Even though it sounds like he was a part of it, that's kind of why that album blows, because it's like a decent band trying to make somebody else's music, not knowing who they are.
just Sid Light and they don't have an identity yet?
Yeah. Whereas this album feels like a band that has finally found their sound in a way.
I see. I see.
The only problem is they end the album with a 13-minute song called Alan's Psychedelic Breakfast, which is just, again, gibberish. There's just sounds of a man named Alan cooking eggs, and he just goes like, I like eggs, got my tea, got my toast. And then you hear like he's like scraping butter on the toast. And then he eats the toast. And then he lights up a cigarette. He just good eggs, and like it's a gibberish nonsense song. Like they had a good album, and then they're like, we got to make it longer. Let's shove 13 minutes of a man eating breakfast on the end.
You know, now that you mention it, I do remember listening to this album, and I made it to that song, and then I almost threw my phone out the window. Like, I stopped listening to it because Alan was having a problem.
Because he's just eating. Yeah, it's just a man eating.
I started having a problem.
Yeah. So I like If. I think If is a really sweet little song written by Roger Waters. Summer 68 is like just a cool pop song written by Richard Wright. And Fat Old Son is like a nice sort of ballady song from David Gilmour. And Adam Hartmother's just an interesting composition with the band feeling like they finally got something to work as a group.
That's cool.
But yeah, that Alan's Psychedelic Breakfast is such a stupid song.
It's just really funny that they like had a thing and then they were like, yeah, so what if we just put the end track of 13 minutes of a man eating breakfast, but it's psychedelic?
Yeah, so that this is where there's like huge debates within like Pink Floyd versus their fans and the fans versus themselves, because like this is the type of song that makes it seem like these guys are on drugs. Like,
right.
It's called Psychedelic Breakfast, and it's useless. So it seems like they did too many drugs, and they were like, all right, guys, this will be a great way to end the record. Come on. Yeah, right.
Metal. I think Meddle, which you did spell out before, but I think I got this one for you for Christmas, like 2 years ago or something.
Yeah.
Which was really hard to find, I remember. I remember enjoying this one. I don't think I understood it the first time I listened to it, but it was like even more enjoyable listening to it again, like a second and a third time. I think I've only listened to it 3 times though. This came out in 1971, so a year after Adam Hartmother.
Yeah, this one, like, so this one is like I said earlier, the same as Adam Hartmother but flipped. So the first half of the album are like smaller songs that all sound kind of different, and then it ends with the long, big, epic, pretty instrumental heavy prog rock opus type song called Echoes, which is an excellent song. It's just like one of those great sort of defining, at least for me, like helps define this genre of just like long compositions, periods of ambient noise with just wind blowing and shit, like sounds of herons in the background, even though it's just right on the synth.
Oh,
like it sounds like birds, but it's just the synthesizer.
Interesting.
Something they would go on to do in on Animals, where the synths sound like animals.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I really love this album. I really like the song Echoes. The title track, One of These Days, is also instrumental, but it's just like this super groovy song. Just has like an incredible bass line. The rest of the songs I think are kind of hit or miss. Like Seamus is just like a weird Beatles song. Like it's a song where it sounds like a guy's like sitting on his porch in a rocking chair and he's just talking about his dog, and then you hear the dog howling.
Nice, guys.
But the weirdness of like That or San Tropez, which also just has weird decisions. Fearless is kind of like the rock song on the album. It's like a slower acoustic-y song, but
Are the rock songs largely like attributed to Gilmore, or is it more like Waters pushing these rock songs, do you think?
San Tropez is written only by Waters. The
Okay.
rest of them are like collaborations between Gilmore and Waters. So most of the band's famous music is like the best collaborations between Gilmore and Waters, where the outline structure of the song is sort of the percussion, which is where Mason comes into it. And then Wright occasionally would write songs. Like he's written some of their famous songs and he's like credited on a number of them, but you can tell some songs just don't have a lot of synth. And it's like, well, it probably means he didn't write anything on that one.
Right. Yeah, the reason I ask is because I also like David Gilmour's album, David Gilmour, which came out in 78 between Animals and the Wall. And yeah, I'm just trying to place like his presence in the band for myself as well as other people. Cause yeah, I really appreciate his guitar.
The more of their stuff you listen to, and probably the more of his solo stuff, the more you can pick up on it. Like what sounds like his stuff versus Waters.
Right. Oh, what on earth? I was looking at their albums, and the final cut was coming in before The Dark Side of the Moon for some reason, even though that came out later.
Yeah, 10 years later.
So then they have Obscured by Clouds, which is a movie soundtrack. Do you have anything to say about that?
Nope, more sleep music.
Got it. And then
then the big one, the one that made them famous forever.
Yeah, so
famous as long as albums are famous.
Any of our younger listeners who have either seen the words Pink Floyd, or you've seen that prism with light passing through it and then like a rainbow after that, that's this album, which is The Dark Side of the Moon. The only reason I want to spell that out is because I've seen students in my school wearing like classic rock shirts, and I was like, oh sweet, like Led Zeppelin, and they're like, what? And I was like, your shirt is a Led Zeppelin shirt, and they're like, yeah, I don't know who that is. And I'm like, but your shirt is that. And they're like, I just like the shirt. So I assume like a whole bunch of Zoomers have Pink Floyd apparel, but they have no idea what it is at all, which is fine. I'm not saying that they need to, but this is what it is. That's what this is.
Yeah. I know the phenomenon you're talking about. It's pretty common. Like there's like an endless. It's especially bad in like the rock community of like the really hardcore fans, almost gatekeeping the music by being like, you can't wear that shirt unless you can tell me the tracks on the album in order and their length of time that they take up and who wrote them, and the lady on The Dark Side of the Moon who sings that Great Gig in the Sky song. You have to know her name. You have to know her exact name, or you take the shirt off.
Yeah, and then you have to tell me your favorite song, why it's your favorite song, and then I'll still shit on you because you're wrong.
I'll hate you for your... If you like the song Money, you're a bad person. Okay?
Right.
That song's too popular.
Yeah.
Real people like Any Color You Like. Real men listen to On the Run on repeat, actually. Okay?
Yeah. This... I mean, we could probably talk about this album alone for like quite a while. Just all of the different like cultural touchstones that it has. each individual song, sort of like popular conspiracy theories associated with it as well.
Yeah, or the how it plays, it syncs up perfectly with two of the cinema's most important films.
Yeah.
The first being The Wizard of Oz, and more recently being Paul Blart Mall Cop.
Excuse me?
It's a little known fact, but Paul Blart Mall Cop was specifically made to sync up with Dark Side of the Moon, played twice, back to back. Perfectly synced up. I don't know why more people don't know this.
Oh, I didn't know that going into this. I knew the first one.
Yeah, the Wizard of Oz one is like the members of Pink Floyd are like, we don't know how that happened. Like we didn't try to do that.
Yeah,
which is where conspiracy theories come in. But
there's also this conspiracy theory that they're satanic because if you play it backwards, it says something about like, I don't even remember, like killing children or something like that. Or
that may actually be true. All their
What?
albums,
it does say that purposefully.
I don't know what it says backwards, but it probably says something because they were known to be experimenting with playing stuff backwards on their earlier albums. Like if you listen what is it? One of These Days off of Metal. There's a part where there's something said, like there's a line of dialogue, but it's like unclear what it says because it's played backwards. So you have to play the song backwards to hear it.
Apparently Waters on Dark Side of the Moon inserted something backwards where he says, "Congratulations, you've just discovered the secret message."
Yep, they did a lot of shit like that because they just wanted to fuck with people who.
I'm sorry, that's on Empty Spaces. Has nothing to do with the Dark Side of the Moon.
On the Wall, gotcha.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's something there. The mix of Dark Side of the Moon is so deep. Like there's just parts where there's like 8 people talking and there's music and sounds. So I'm sure there's stuff just hidden in the background of somebody, probably Waters, just whispering sweet nothings into the microphone. Or whispering just, let's kill all the children. Let's
yeah, like children. Saying like really weird stuff just to mess with people, or he's just a Satanist. I don't know.
Right all along.
Yeah, some scary stuff.
He likes to talk about that a lot now.
He does like to talk a lot about Palestine and Israel. Yes.
Very pro Russia fella.
Mm-hmm. No, anyway. No. Anyway, the album is 10 songs, 43 minutes. So it's like one of the tightest, most iconic albums.
Yeah, and it's got like the end goes into the beginning. It's meant to be like you can listen to it on repeat. It's pretty easy listening. It has a wide range of sound in it. Like there are standard rock songs. There's lots of really jazzy stuff. Great Gig in the Sky is like epic.
Yeah, I would describe the album as being far-reaching and like undulating. Like it just constantly is like unspooling over and over and over again. And it's just really, it has like so many satisfying beat by beats, but then also like satisfying like culminations that they've built up towards. Sorry, I don't necessarily think we're going to add anything to the conversation and analysis that's already been done about this album, but yeah, it's just a great album.
Yeah, and in general, I like their next 3 albums more anyway.
Right. Wish You Were Here comes next in 1975. Another really short as far as songs album goes, 5 songs, 44 minutes long.
Mm-hmm.
This one has actually a ton of really good songs. Like all of them on here, I would say are pretty great.
Yeah, because it has really this album is like half of the album is just Shine On You Crazy Diamond, which is, one long instrumental piece. Actually, it's not instrumental. I guess there's some singing saying the words "Shine On, You Crazy Diamond."
Well, it starts with parts 1 through 5 and then ends with that parts 6 through 9.
Mm-hmm.
And in between is Welcome to the Machine, Have a Cigar, and then Wish You Were Here.
Yeah, which are all three very different sounding songs once again. That's where you can hear more of a difference between Waters and Gilmour. Because Welcome to the Machine is thoroughly a Waters song.
Yeah.
And Have a Cigar is a Waters song, but it has like another guy on it.
And then
like
Wish
somebody
You
who's not in the band. What's his name? Roy Harper.
Oh, interesting. And then Wish You Were Here is largely Gilmour.
Yeah, I think it's more his lyrics, and they wrote the song together.
Talk about, I personally just really, really like Wish You Were Here. I mean, obviously, I like the other ones. Shout out to Jake Siegel, actually. I remember he really, really liked this song. Still likes it a lot, but I think he had the shirt actually like back in elementary or middle school.
Oh yeah, I mean all of these album covers are now iconic, at least to me.
Yeah.
This one being the man on fire.
Yes. Shaking hands with a man on fire. Animals comes next in 1977.
Yeah, this one is my favorite.
You actually have I don't know if you want to share what you have from this album. Oh, yeah. Is it?
You mean that I have the album, or
Wait, is it this one or the
records,
wall?
but...
One of them you have that's signed.
Oh yeah, that's the wall. Yeah.
Gotcha. Sorry, I just ruined that for the wall. I thought it was like Animals.
That platinum plated signed one. Yeah.
Yeah, that is sweet. Who got that for you again?
Ken.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Uncle Ken.
Yeah.
Shout out to Uncle Ken.
Gift.
Yeah. The Animals, I am large. Like I couldn't tell you anything about this album, unfortunately. I've listened to it before, but I don't really remember any of it.
I mean, it's heavily influenced by Animal Farm, but instead of being like anti-communist, anti-Stalinist, it's anti-capitalist. Yeah, it's again only 5 songs, but this time it's inverted from Wish You Were Here. So if Wish You Were Here is like, 2 really long songs bookending the album, and then 3 shorter songs in the middle, this one is 2 really short songs bookending the album, and then 3 very long songs in the middle.
Yeah, so as you can tell, like sort of a through line up to this point is they seem to really be they're not coming into their own anymore. Like they are themselves.
Peak Floyd.
And then they are very strong with having like a complete album, a complete theme, and they are able to create each piece that works towards a goal. And then even each successive album, then they do something in reference to the prior one, almost as if it's building up. I guess you could say is putting like different bricks on top of each other to construct the wall or construct something. Yeah.
Yeah, this is just a great album. I mean, it's in terms of like Wish You Were Here has a very melancholic feeling to it, and by the end of the album it feels like they've come to, like, musically and sonically you get this idea that like they've come to grips with kicking this guy out of their band who helped them to become who they were and who they would become.
Yeah, which I know that Shine On You Crazy Diamond I guess you could say, kind of splits Pink Floyd fans, or has split people on Pink Floyd, because it's seen kind of as a shitty way of coming to terms with it and then making money off of that. But I appreciate the fact that they tried to come up with something and like express how they feel about it, despite it being like an overall not great situation for anyone involved with Sid Barrett.
Mm-hmm.
And then after Animals is The Wall, which is a double album, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this comes out in 1979, which makes a lot of sense that it took 2 years, but each of the 3 albums before that took 2 years as well. But
Yeah.
this one I would describe as being not operatic, but like more like a play, right?
Yeah, this pushes their like, if the last 3 albums are all like pretty definitively telling a story both musically and conceptually, this one is just a story, to the point where it literally became a movie. Like they made it and then it just became a movie immediately.
Like they made the movie or someone else made it? What do you mean?
They were involved. Like the screenplay's written by Roger Waters. And they did the music because it's. But yeah, I'd call it like an opera. In fact, I'm pretty sure Waters has made it into an opera by this point.
Apparently in July 1977, this is on the Apple Music description of the album, Waters was referring to the rest of the band members as, quote, the Muffins at this point in time. And the Wall apparently started to take shape, or allegedly started just to take shape after Waters spit in the face of an audience member. Like, he just leaned over the stage and just spat in their face.
Yeah, I mean, Pink Floyd was also like they did not adjust well to being so famous. Like during their live shows, they just like would hide. They would just put all the big lights up and hide behind the lights. And except Waters, who loved the spotlight and started to become an egomaniac. And this whole album is, really concept heavy on like a man trying to deal with his fame while also dealing with like childhood trauma.
Yeah. Like building a wall between them and the audience, and building a wall between them and society. Like isolation. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, that is the direct metaphor, is the wall is a thing he's building between the audience and his own band and himself, so he can escape into some kind of comfortable childhood fantasy.
Right.
But he's eventually, like, the album ends with him being persecuted and prosecuted by his own like fantasy subconscious, and the wall is torn down. And he's forced to go back to the beginning, as this is another album where the end leads back into the beginning. Sort of as a side of like, this is an endless cycle. But the album has plenty of other stuff in it. Like there's large themes about war and loss, the difficulties of love, the difficulties of childhood trauma, and I mean, obviously, most notably, like the impossibility of dealing with fame at that level.
Yeah, I'd like
the absurdity of fame.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that might be one thing that people sort of knock this album for, and might knock Pink Floyd on as well, is that they are sort of like, they're not punching down per se, but they're like commenting on these things while, you know, being extremely famous. But at this time, I believe they weren't in financial straits, but they had like they made some like questionable investments. So I think they were like financially strained at this point in time in 1977.
Really?
Yeah, apparently. Yeah, due to
Buying too many jets.
I don't know what exactly it was that was causing them to be financially strained, but there was risky investments had put them under major financial pressure. Yeah. The point I was going to make on this album is that this album also shows you that despite a song sounding a certain way, despite the lyrics, like there's obviously more going on than just the music. Like there's a ton of not hidden messages like, oh yeah, this means money is bad, or this means like whatever, but there is something else going on outside of music, and I think that's a great ethic for aspiring musicians to carry into their music. Not necessarily in order to be like quote unquote deep, like you got to make deep shit, but something that like is expansive to who you are and is you trying to explore yourself and like navigate the world and like express something that other people can identify with through like your own struggle, is like how I would see part of this album.
Yeah, I would agree. I would describe it as being like this was like the peak for them of their artistry. Even though it was Waters just slowly taking over the band and removing collaboration, this isn't necessarily musically their most interesting album. It might be. I think Animals is better, but in terms of like artistically what you're talking about,
yeah,
I think this is as good as it gets with Pink Floyd. Really as good as it gets with any musical band.
Apparently, go ahead.
I was just gonna say this is reminiscent of the type of stuff that like Kanye West would make. Like I would say The Wall is quite analogous to something like My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy.
Yeah, I could see that. Apparently during album sessions, this is when Waters basically forced Rick Wright out.
Because he just didn't like what he was playing, or
I think that, as well as it was either just that or like his ego caused that in some capacity. Yeah, but between this album and the final cut, which came out in 1983, they basically like went on tour for quite a number of those years, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And apparently during the first half of many of the shows, there were a bunch of roadies who would construct a brick wall. Sorry, brick by cardboard brick. They would make 40 feet in the middle and 130 feet across the top, which is really funny. They also would Waters is still going on tour at this point in time, and he still features like a really large pig, like inflatable pig that just sort of like rises in the room.
Oh yeah, well he does hate pigs.
Mm-hmm.
Which he just describes as capitalists, pretty much.
Right.
Like, remember, this man is so anti-capitalist that he's like pro-Russia and pro-China.
Right. When you initially said that, I thought you were saying that ironically in the episode, but I guess he is pro-Russia, yeah.
He like his He's been in the news for the last year because he keeps doing interviews where he's like, I don't know, fuck NATO. I think actually Russia has the right to invade these bastards.
Yeah, which is a really funny place to find oneself after making an album that is based off of Animal Farm. That's quite an area to land in.
Or making the Final Cut, which is like the most anti-war album I've ever heard.
All right, the Final Cut. Let's do that one. 1983.
This is an extremely anti-war album.
It starts with a song, "The Post-War Dream."
Yeah, it has the Gunner's Dream. It's a pretty great album, but it's not a Pink Floyd album.
Right, it's primarily
just Roger Waters.
It's like basically his first solo album, essentially. Yeah. And Rick Wright is no longer part of the band.
Functionally, Nick Mason isn't really either. Like he does drums on a few songs, but mostly he was just doing sound effects. Like,
yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything to say about this other than what you said. I did mention before that in 1978 Gilmour started doing his own thing as well, like started putting out more like solo stuff, which he may have seen the writing on the wall at that point in time.
He definitely did.
Momentary Lapse of Reason came out in 1987.
Yeah, so this is no more Waters. He's gone.
Waters
is out.
Oh,
no more Roger Waters.
What happened? He was just like, I'm better than this, or
no,
they pushed him out.
He tried to kick out everyone else, and then because there were two of them, they were like, no, Pink Floyd is us and not you. So goodbye. Them. Yep.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so they got the rights to Pink Floyd functionally.
Through court, as you mentioned. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and this album is like, I called it like generic 80s rock.
I don't mind On the Turning Away.
I don't think it's a bad album. I just think relative to the last 6 albums they did, this feels like so many steps in the wrong direction.
That's a really funny characterization of it. Yeah.
It moves into more mainstream stuff. It sounds more like a Genesis record than it sounds like a Pink Floyd record. And not the good Genesis, not the avant-garde art rock Genesis, like the really generic Phil Collins 80s pop Genesis, which might be the stuff people like. I think that is maybe the most popular stuff. I'm sure a lot of people love Momentary Lapse of Reason. I think it's so much worse than all their other work.
Yeah.
At least their 70s work. Maybe
right.
I'll relax on the 60s stuff. This is better than that.
Yeah, so they start to take more and more time between albums because their next one, The Division Bell, comes out in 1994.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it took them a few years to make this one because of the losing Waters. And without their lead songwriter, they kind of had to bring in more people for Gilmour to round things out. They did get Richard Wright back, though.
Oh.
Yeah. But yeah, then they made The Division Bell.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They did get him back because they had been I know they were performing with him in the 2000s. Yeah, that's nice. Actually,
they had him back for a Momentary Lapse of Reason, and then he just stayed in the band because they were friends. They'd been friends with this guy for 15 years, and then the one lost his mind. So yeah, they were like, no, Richard, come on, you're part of this.
Yeah, you're one of us. Interesting. Yeah, this is just quite a ride of a band. I mean, any band, obviously, there's going to be friction and abrasion, and success, fame, money, what have you, creative differences, someone largely being like a huge creative like tour de force, and then also like thinking of like your ego taking hold and being like, well, actually I'm the one who's doing all of this, so what the hell are you guys except muffins?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I like the fact that he was generally responsible in large part for something like The Wall and even more control over animals. Like, I don't even necessarily disagree with Waters in principle. Like, he was probably a better artist than those guys at that time. But
the way he went about it,
yeah, like, I would rather he keep making music at that level and everyone hate him than him just be like, let's get along, fellas. Like that seems to be true for certain artists. Like they're just bastards.
Right. You're saying you would rather he be a bastard than try to get along?
If him being a bastard gave us Animals and The Wall, yes. There's obviously a line. Like I don't mean to suggest that, like, you know, Roman Polanski needed to diddle little kids or whatever to make Chinatown. But
right, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, like what I'm saying is, like, I think it's okay that he was mean to these three rich guys for like 4 years, if it meant we got some good records.
To that extent, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
But it's part of Pink Floyd's like mythos and legend, is the fact that they're like a group of tragic guys. Like,
definitely,
the guy who started it gets kicked out, and then they write, you know, multiple songs and a whole album about that tragedy, and then they fall apart just 10 years later because another guy loses his mind for a different reason.
Yeah.
Really, what's weird is the fact that they still went on to make another few albums.
Yeah, their last album.
We didn't really talk about Division Bell.
Oh, right. Division Bell came out in 94.
Yeah. So at this point, it's been 10 years since Waters was in the band. They've only put out one album in 10 years. So they put this thing together, and it you can tell they just haven't played together in a while. Every song is too long. Stuff needs to be edited down, but it's not. It still sounds very generic and like a lot of other music of its time. So it's not really experimental. It's not genre pushing, boundary pushing. It has some great songs on it, but there's just a lot of like really masturbatory long guitar solos, large swaths of instrumentation, and just like weird compositions. The album has a general concept, which is about the division in the band, but it feels like they probably should have put this out right after Waters left the band. It just feels like creatively bankrupt. Like it was an attempt for them to write their own story on what happened with the band breaking up, but it came out 10 years later. And because the musicianship and artistry isn't quite there, I don't find it to be, you know, that important of an album or even very memorable of a listen.
I mean, emotionally and creatively, it probably would have made more sense to have done earlier, like you said, when the embers are still hot, instead of trying to remember those embers and what that would feel like.
That being said, like I would recommend this album because there are parts of like every song I like.
The Division Bell.
Like What Do You Want From Me has a great bass line. Wearing the Inside Out is just like a really great song. The final song on the album, High Hopes, is just like a really nice sentimental track that I think perfectly closes out their career. Because it's sort of about something very bittersweet and the end of things, the end of a friendship. But unfortunately, this wasn't the end of their career.
2014, 20 years later.
Yeah, they would. I think they did some touring in the 2000s. I don't think they ever really re-friended Roger Waters, who at this point it was just in his Roger Waters world, doing Roger Waters things like propping up China and making people think he's anti-Semitic by being super pro-Palestine.
So how does this work as far as like their legal battles? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but Waters is allowed to play Pink Floyd songs at his concerts.
Yes.
So how does that work? Like he doesn't have the rights to that, or he does have the rights to play them?
I think he like legally is still, they're his songs still because he wrote most of them. Like he just wrote them with Gilmour, so both can still play it. He just can't play it as Pink Floyd.
He can play it as Waters though. Okay.
Yeah, something like that. I don't understand legal. Like I don't think they ever tried to get him to stop playing the music. Because they're like, yeah, it's your music. Like I don't think they're upset about it.
Yeah.
Because both that band, like Pink Floyd, the three guys kept touring and doing well, and Waters was still just sells out arenas because he just shows up and he's like, yeah, I'll play In the Flesh and Comfortably Numb, but also this stuff on my new record, and people are like, play Great Gig in the Sky. And he's like, I've got new music though. Play Us and Them. No, yeah, but I made 3 solo albums since then. Where's money? Play Money.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that's just how his stuff goes. But yeah, I don't think he ever had a problem playing the stuff he wrote as a solo act.
I was just curious on that. The Endless River then came out in 2014, 20 years following.
Yeah, Gilmour and Mason vaguely made it seem like this was supposed to be like a
closing out
swan song for Richard Wright, like a tribute to Richard Wright.
Oh,
because
I
see.
Like
I think in their view, they probably looked back and they're like, well, if we did all this stuff for Sid, why don't we do this for Richard now that he's gone? Since he kind of got dicked out of the wall and stuff. So they took a bunch of old recordings, like synth recordings that Wright, I think, did probably for the Division Bell and some after. And then they just recorded a bunch of Gilmour generic guitars and a bunch of Nick Mason hitting just some basic drum stuff. And yeah, they put together a fine ambient album, completely harmless. No teeth to this thing at all.
We get to look forward to what they will inevitably be releasing on the next band member's death, which is going to be some recordings spliced together with other pieces.
Oh God, please no. God, no.
It's gonna happen. God, based on their track record. We just walked through how many times have they done that? Whichever one of them inevitably passes away next.
Unless Mason and Gilmour die together in a plane crash.
Right. I would just assume if it's Waters, then the other two are gonna figure out how to give him like some level of tribute.
Oh God. They're all old enough now where it might be too hard, but maybe.
Yeah. With that being said, I think we should figure out how to sort of summarize down this band. Yeah, Pink Floyd. Unless you had something before we give like our final thoughts on them.
No, not too much. I mean, I've listened to their stuff pretty thoroughly. Like I've listened to all their records. I've heard some of them a lot more than others. I still return fairly frequently to Animals in the Wall. I just find them to be like infinitely listenable.
I think those two also probably match up with not politically, but like philosophically, some ideas that you identify with as well, like anti-capitalism.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted to kind of explain why, possibly why you like it besides the music.
Yeah, I mean, Dogs is definitely one of my favorite songs ever.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, just a great song, and probably why Animals has endured for so long for me. But as an album, like the whole point of the structure of the album is it starts with this harmless minute long Pigs on a Wing, which is just like a nice little song about finding somebody to love. And then you have these three increasingly depressing songs about capital. Like Dogs is about climbing the corporate ladder and the inevitability of dying alone of some incurable disease. Like just like death comes for us all, no matter how much you're greedy or how much money you amass. And then Pigs is more.
Wait, hold on. So why do you like that? What about that do you like? Because for most people, they're kind of like, dear God, that doesn't sound very pleasant. Why would I listen to that?
I guess I just find it to be a good reminder of the hollowness of the pursuit of money.
Okay.
And yeah, it's ironic coming from people who were like the number one band in the world at that time.
But at least they're like
I find
self-aware.
The message still rings true.
Yeah.
The song is just very emotional because it's about like it traces back why someone would be driven by greed.
Gotcha.
Like that's kind of what the lyrics of the song are about. And then musically, it's a very spacey song, sort of in a conceptual way. This dog, this wolf in sheep's clothing, like has these fantasies of just sort of like floating by, like doesn't really want to be involved in all this shit, but has been forced into it. Which I identify with just living in America and feeling like, you know, gotta make money, gotta go fast, gotta make money fast, gotta make a lot of money.
Yeah.
What's a good way to make money? Stabbing people in the back, political maneuvering, scheming.
Stepping on their faces in order to climb the ladder.
Exactly. Stomping everybody under me on the ladder. Closing every door behind me so nobody else can get in. Amassing wealth. Screwing people over.
I just really wanted to get all of that out there because that is what I assumed you meant by liking Dogs a lot. But yeah, that's awesome. Like I think that's important for people to recognize, to understand that feeling, and what better way of experiencing that than through a Pink Floyd song.
Well, yeah, the song ends with them talking about how capitalism grinds you down like a stone. Like that's the last line of the song, is just ground down by the stone.
Shit.
And the next two songs are, you know, more political. Like Pigs is more of a political song, like aimed at the current British administration. And then Sheep is sort of about how it's the fault of ignorant of the masses in a weird way that allows greedy people to succeed. But then the sheep rise up and kill the dogs. So it's like, you know, that's kind of horrifying. But then the song ends with another short reprieve, Pigs on a Wing again. But the song closes out what was set up in part one, like Pigs on the Wing part one, which is a solution to all this problem, which is just like it uses the metaphor of a dog. Like Waters considers himself one of these dogs, one of these hungry wolves, a capitalist. But his solution for his own greed and ambition is finding someone he loves and having a home and a family. So there's like a sentiment around all of this dark stuff in the middle of him being like, the only way to get through is not with money or greed or power or any of this. It's just with finding people you can tolerate.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Tolerate.
Oh, yeah. I mean, love, tolerate. Yeah. It's not like he invented that sentiment either. I just really like the way it's expressed here.
Yes. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, for me, I wouldn't necessarily say I have a favorite album. I do obviously really enjoy pretty much all of the songs on Dark Side of the Moon, but I think Wish You Were Here, the older that I get, the more I like it. I've always really liked that song, but it just like really makes me think about all the people that I've lost along the way. And yeah, just like in general, also like nostalgic of like childhood, losing childhood innocence, losing that like time of one's life, which is not what the song is about, but it certainly like makes me feel that way. Just about like time that has been lost to time, or like a place in one's life that you eventually have to move on, but even in moving on, like you still have that like, damn, like wish you were still here, like wish this person was still here, for what they for who they were. Yeah. I mean, to me, I think obviously this band is one of the most influential rock bands ever. Not just for their sound, not just for their lyrics, but as you said, for their myth as well, and what they were reaching for, and ultimately what they were able to accomplish in it's certainly not a band that like, had like huge hopes and, oh, they shot for the stars but they landed on the moon. Like they were like really like, they really achieved more than they set out for, and they certainly set out for a lot, I would say. Like they surpassed what they, I think, anticipated.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think Wish You Were Here. The brilliance of the album comes from how much is packed into just 5 songs.
Yeah, sorry, I meant
Conceptually.
Wish You Were. I meant Wish You Were Here, the song, but
Yeah,
also
yeah.
the album. Yeah,
I just mean on the whole, but like, because you get that longing perfectly from Wish You Were Here, but the whole
Yes.
album is also about like questioning the band's own ambition and being like, how did we get here? Like
I meant in large part like the band. Not, I wasn't using the album as that lens. I was saying even after like all of their albums, that they were able to surpass anything that they had originally set out to do with their music.
Gotcha.
Which is really incredible for anyone who's listening, who might be listening to this, or anyone who has listened to Pink Floyd or listens to music. That's just really inspiring, that you're able to surpass what you have set out to do, not just financially or what have you, but with your lasting effect of your artistry and what you create. So I find great inspiration from them. And I certainly am going to revisit some of their albums and listen to even some of their later stuff that I haven't necessarily explored to the fullest extent.
Oh yeah, I can't recommend everything from Adam Heartmother through the final cut enough. I mean, some of them are tighter than others, and there are some weak songs in that stretch.
Except for Obscured by Clouds.
I don't recommend that one ever.
So yeah, I mean, whether you're young or old, you would like to revisit Pink Floyd or visit them for the first time, yeah, check them out. That ties it up.
Yeah, my lawyer does want me to say, because apparently I was ambiguous earlier, that I do not condone any of Roger Waters' fun little new tirades about Palestine or Russia or China.
Okay, I'm glad that's clear.
It needed to be made clear that I was a little loose with maybe made it sound like I agreed with him.
At least you're not keeping a saucer full of secrets. You've poured it out for us.
Yes.
And in bringing this full circle, we hope you enjoy the intro of each of our episodes. I think it sets a great tone for what is to come. And it's even better that it was performed by our youngest brother.